swan boats and daisy chains. Can't seem to recall my true given name. I see my footprints, how they come, how they go. Was that yesterday or only a moment ago? My heart is gone. I've gone cold. My heart is gone. I've gone cold.
Welcome to the social-engineer.org podcast number 81.
Wow. Really?
81.
81. Like all of them on time and released, somehow podcast guests found.
Well, we won't go that far, but we'll let the public believe that that's a true story. 6.75 years of podcasting as of this release. I can't believe it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it started off as like just something to do for fun, and now here we are 7 years later almost. Just you and me. Ping is not with us today.
I know. Ping and Dave, MIA today.
Ping is under the weather, so we're going to give her an excuse. But Dave claims he spilled coffee on his laptop, and that's why he can't be here.
That's the excuse today.
That's the excuse.
So it's not lunch. It's not a call. It's not a meeting.
It's coffee.
Spilled coffee. Well, at least he's getting more creative.
That's true. Yeah, there's a creative one. I mean, now if it's true, Dave, we are very sorry for your loss because we understand how it is to lose a laptop. If it's not true, well, I can't say it here on the podcast, but that's okay.
So, it's a bad habit of us in the profession. My husband actually looked at my laptop the other day and said it looked like the cash register at a cafeteria. So, I kind of feel Dave's pain.
Well, that is only because you never eat quality food. You only eat snack food, and you always do it over your laptop.
This is true. I will fess up to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really disturbing mentally.
I live on Nutella.
That is really funny, by the way. Always. Team meetings, people. If you want to see something funny, you should join us for a team meeting sometimes. Michele will always be eating something that involves snack food.
Actually, our last meeting was so long, I ate both breakfast and lunch during the meeting. Nutella for breakfast and Chick-fil-A for lunch.
That is true.
That's just tragedy right there.
She's stuck in front of the computer so long, her husband has to go out and forage food for her and bring it to her at the computer so she doesn't die.
It's a sad thing. He's awesome.
Yeah, that's not sad. That's good. That's good because it's either that or you're dead. So we're happy that he does it because, we kind of need you alive right now. Talking about Michele being alive, let's talk about our schedule.
Oh, yes.
The first thing on the schedule is May 2nd. Well, this will be past tense when this podcast comes out.
So let's just say it was awesome.
It was the most amazing speech ever. Michele is keynoting at Interop.
Oh, no, it's not a keynote. That's a stretch. I'll be there with famous people. How about that?
I'm sorry. Here I am misquoting. Well, I'm going to call it a keynote. It's a keynote in my mind.
All right. I'll take that.
And that is May 2nd, already past tense. But if you were in Las Vegas, then I'm sure you saw the awesomeness that is Michele. Let's see, what else we got going? Okay, I'm doing my next Carnegie Mellon class, my next CISO training class, May 5th. So if you're a CISO and you want to be part of that, you can sign up at the CMU website for their class. They have a class specialized for CISOs and all the stuff they have to deal with in this whacked out world.
And will it be past tense by the time the podcast is out?
Also past tense.
So we'll just say that was awesome as well.
It was amazing. The CISOs were throwing roses at my feet. It was unbelievable. Now, here's something that's not past tense. If you're interested in flying all the way to Honolulu, we have one of our brand new people, Lori Varner. She's going to be giving a speech at the 14th annual PCAT Summit at the Honolulu Community College on May 20th. If you're anywhere near Hawaii, you want to check that out, go to our website on the social-engineer.com site. You can see it there.
And we will also say that it will be awesome.
It's going to be awesome. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then another Michele speech. Another one. The 8th Annual Information Security Summit in Los Angeles, California. Michele is keynoting there. Am I right about that?
I'm not sure if it's a keynote or not, but I'll be there with, famous people again.
I'm calling it a keynote.
Come say hello.
Other people will be there with Michele. That's the way we're going to word that. May 20th. Actually, if you're not even near LA, if you're like in New York, you should fly to LA to see this speech. That's all I have to say to that. Okay, then where am June 2nd, which I don't know what possessed me to schedule this. So let's talk about this. I need a therapist for a minute. June 2nd, I'm going to Atlanta, Georgia. I am giving a keynote, actually, at Secure World in Atlanta at the Cobb Galleria on June 2nd. The very next day, I'm flying to the UK. So somehow, I'm flying from here into Georgia, giving a speech, flying home, packing, and flying to the UK the very next morning.
Oh, I was going to ask you, are you flying directly from Atlanta? Are you going home first?
I'm going home first because my wonderful wife is coming with me to the UK.
Oh, well, see, that'll be nice.
It will be. But it will be an amazing travel trip for the 2 days, which brings us to June 6th through 10, our APSE class, which I will say this out loud because by the time this comes out, it may not be true. There are 2 slots left. That is it. That class is sold out. We have 2 slots, and one of them is pending on an approval. So we may only have 1 slot left in that whole class. I'm really excited about that. Our next APSE class is in Vegas, July 30, but that's totally sold out, and there's a waiting list of like 10 people. So I'm not sure what's going to happen there, but it is sold out, so there's no more availability there.
Yeah, we can't even take bribes if you offer them at this point.
Well, we will take them, but I will take the bribe. If you can actually bribe me, that's perfectly fine. I will accept all bribes, but I can't do anything about it.
But it will still do you no good.
Yeah. You won't get into the class because I have no say over it, but I'll take the bribe. So please send them to my email address, bribes@social-engineer.com. And then Michele, this is a really exciting one. I'm excited about this. October. We're already talking about October. I know it's way in the future, but Michele is on a panel at the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing Conference down in Houston, Texas. She's on a panel of other elite women in technology.
Including Dave.
Including Dave Kennedy. Elite women and Dave. When we got approached about this, they said, hey, we want to invite Michele as one of the leading women in this industry space. Can she come and speak? And we're like, yes, of course. Great. This is awesome. Who else is on the panel? And they list these other women, and I'm excited. And Dave Kennedy. I'm like, wait, hang on. Let's back up here. Is there something about Dave I don't know? Because
yeah, maybe there's something that Dave needs to tell us, actually. Is there something that he hasn't shared?
I'm very confused. But unfortunately, I would love to go see that, but I will be in North Carolina at the 12th annual ISSA InfoSecCon in Raleigh the same date, giving a speech there. In between Vegas and you going to Grace Hopper, we just got approved for DerbyCon.
I wish Dave was here because he'd be able to talk about it. But
I do wish Dave was here because we have to talk about something serious. Dave decided to alter my bio for this training. So, here we are. We're on the training, right? You can go to their website. You can purchase training. And I'm looking at it right now. I'm going to read it to you because this really, really upsets me, right? And here's what he put for my bio. Chris, in his spare time, is a pianist who is dedicated to the love of music. The passion for social engineering in general spawned from his passion for music. When Chris was only 8 years old, he heard the song Bruce Hornsby, The Way It Is, and quickly fell in love with the piano. After that, he learned several of Bruce Hornsby's amazing and inspiring songs, including Mandolin Rain, amongst many others. Chris's love and passion for Bruce Hornsby led him to the social engineering field and continues to drive him every day. I would just like to say to anyone who's signing up for this class that is false. It is propaganda.
I didn't know you were an accomplished pianist.
I'm definitely not. I can play the tap on a desk with my fingers. I can do that. I can tap on a desk.
So you're an air pianist.
I can whistle.
All right.
That's it.
Can you whistle a Bruce Hornsby song?
You hate me, don't you? You hate me. You hate me. No, there is no Bruce Hornsby being whistled. Ever. So thanks, Dave. I wish you were here to defend yourself and talk about why you would do such a horrible thing to your friends. But, since you're not, I guess we'll just wait.
We'll have to wait for his retort if he gets his laptop fixed.
Yeah. Coffee top. Okay, so that is our amazing schedule from now until like the end of the year. There's a lot more that's going to be happening. I'm sure we'll be adding to that, and we'll keep you guys updated, but you can always check out the website if you want to know what's happening and where to go see Michele for all of her keynotes. because there's just thousands of them keynoting all over the place. So let's see. Okay, let's talk about the podcast. I saw this article, and it came up in one of the Google alerts that I have for different psychological studies that we like to read about. And this one came across my desk called On the Nature of Creepiness. And what got me about it was they did some tests about why like clowns are creepy. That's why I wanted Dave here, because he's deathly afraid of clowns. I thought this would be good therapy for him, right? For one time, he would actually find out why psychologically clowns are creepy to him. And he's not even here to get that answer. So we reached out to one of the authors of this paper, Dr. Frank McAndrew, and talked to him a little bit back and forth about coming on the podcast, and he agreed. So we're going to get Frank on the Dr. McAndrews on the podcast now and talk to him about this study as well as other things that he's researched into. Dr. McAndrews, thanks for coming on the show today.
Happy to be here. A lot of fun.
So maybe we could just start off with you could tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your research and how you got into this form of research.
Well, I'm a professor at a small liberal arts college. So by definition, you're a jack of all trades. And so over the years, I've dabbled in a little bit of everything. And I was kind of a Johnny-come-lately to evolutionary psychology. I'm old enough that it didn't really exist when I was coming of age. It wasn't a thing back then. I started going to some professional meetings and doing some reading and really got excited about it. And it's been very helpful to me because it gives me a lens for thinking about just about any kind of a problem. It's a way of thinking. And I guess if I were to describe what I do, I'm sort of always on the lookout for things in everyday life that normal people would wonder about. And when I discover that nobody's done any actual research on it, I get kind of excited about it and want to be the first one in there. I was the first person, as far as I know, who did actual experiments on the psychology of gossip. And there's nothing that's been part of human social life longer than gossip, right? You know, some people have written some opinion and kinds of things about it. And anthropologists have talked a little bit about what people gossip about in various societies, but nobody had actually manipulated variables and made predictions about what people ought to do. So that's an example of the kind of thing I get interested in. In a similar way, I got interested in why people decide to name their kids after somebody or not. And nobody had actually done a study on that either. And so I found out some very interesting things about you name kids after people for a variety of reasons, to set them up for future favors. But a lot of it is about reassuring fathers of paternity, reassuring the families of fathers that the kid is really related to them. Anyway, I digress.
Actually, your research on gossip, if you can summarize, what was the finding? Was it really validation? That's why people enjoy it, or what?
Okay, the gist of it is, it's a human universal. Everywhere you go, people do it. Everywhere you look in history, it's been a big deal. And we have all these sanctions about what we're going to do to people who gossip against the wrong people at the wrong time. And it's got a bad rap. Everybody talks about gossip as this evil thing, right? But they're usually defining gossip as something that other people do. You know, if I'm talking, I'm just sharing important information or looking out for somebody's well-being. Gossip is something other people do. And by definition, people think of it as a bad thing. But in fact, most of what we talk about is other people. And most of what we talk about qualifies as gossip. And most of what we talk about when we gossip serves a positive social function. One of the reasons you do what you're supposed to do at work, to be a good citizen, is, you know, people are going to gossip about you if you don't, and your reputation is going to suffer. So it's a way of kind of keeping people in line, and it's a way of keeping people doing what they're supposed to do. It's also a way of bonding people together, right? If you tell your coworkers, I am better than that, I am above this, I do not gossip. Well, what you're saying to them is, I don't trust you with information. I don't want you to trust me with information. I do not want to be part of your group. And so it serves all these positive functions. So as an evolutionary psychologist, my theory was, if this is part of human nature, it's part of human nature because it served some valuable adaptive function. And that function ought to be to make you socially successful. People who were obsessed with the goings-on of other people did better than people who didn't have a clue what other people were doing. And so we're the descendants of busybodies as a result of that. Our ancestors were the ones who kept tabs on who was sleeping with who and who had powerful allies and who was planning to do what. And so I had some predictions about, if this is true, we ought to know what types of information people are interested in, what types of people they're interested in. And in a nutshell, it kind of came out the way I thought it would. We like gossip about people of the same age as us. We like gossip about people that are our own sex because these are our competitors. If I'm an 18-year-old caveman, they're the ones I'm jockeying for position with in my society. I have to know what they're up against. I don't really care what the 50-year-old cavemen are doing, and except for wanting to know if somebody's going to be a good mate or not, women are not as interesting to me either. And that's exactly what we found. And also, I want dirt. We want gossip that's useful. If it's about somebody higher in the food chain than me or one of my competitors, I want dirt because I can exploit that, right? If there's another caveman who's already higher in the pecking order than I am, and I find out he just got another beautiful wife and dragged home a mastodon for dinner, that doesn't help me because he's already way above me. I can't use this information. But if I find out he's had a falling out with a political ally, or if he's having trouble with one of his wives, this has been more interesting to me. I might be able to use this. On the other side of that, good information about relatives of mine or friends of mine is going to be very useful because I might be able to exploit that to get ahead. So over a series of experiments, we discovered that the pattern of what people are interested in follows exactly along those lines.
So we shouldn't feel bad for being gossips because it's hardwired, isn't it?
You should only feel bad about being a bad gossip.
I see, okay.
It's a social skill. It's only when you don't do it right you get in trouble.
Exactly.
When you were talking, I was applying it personally, and I'm thinking, you're right. Like, I have 2 kids, and if I hear gossip about their friends, I listen because I'm their dad, but I really don't care. But when I hear something about one of my peers, now I'm interested. I want to know more. Give me some more details.
Friends of your kids' friends.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Yeah, that's a fascinating.
It pushes buttons in our brains. You don't want to hear it, but you can't look away. It just grabs you.
From like an influence perspective, did you find that gossip was very validating to the listener as far as building rapport and trust and things like that, or was it opposite?
I didn't really look at that question, but there are lots of other studies that show that morale in work groups, for example, is very strongly related to having sort of a vital and fun gossip network. And when you have these workplaces that try to stamp out gossip in the workplace, and there's a guy in Chicago who's got a public relations firm who's written a book on this, and he's on the air all the time. And I come on once in a while to be the naysayer. I just don't think it's possible, first of all, to stop people from gossiping. And you're going to undermine morale. I know what people are thinking is they want to stop the backbiting, vicious kind of stuff. But you can't stop all of it. And you don't really want to.
Yeah, that's fascinating. You brought it up, and we weren't even talking about you with that topic, and it was interesting enough for us. That's awesome. The study that I saw of yours that got us to reach out to you was this one that you did just a couple years ago on creepiness and how we perceive things as creepy. So what motivated you to even look into that? Because this is a question that I wish one of our other guys, he spilled coffee on his laptop and he couldn't be here, but he's like deathly afraid of clowns. We're talking like if a picture of a clown's on the screen, he like curdles up and sucks his thumb. It's like really bad.
Yeah, I think he might be more along the lines of phobic, but yes, definitely finds
not a fan of McDonald's, I take.
No, any clown, and to torture him, other people, not me, of course, because I'm such a nice guy, but I can gossip to you about other people may at conferences put pictures of like Pennywise and other scary clowns up on screens. It really freaks him out. So we read this study, like, Dave, we have an answer. You got to come on and talk to this guy. He knows why you find it creepy.
Well, I think, as Freud would say, there's no such thing as an accident. This spilled coffee was his way out.
Exactly what I said, Michele.
That's awesome.
Exactly what I said. You hear that, Dave? So what made you even look into this topic as a study?
Yeah, and people have started asking me that. I've been doing a lot of interviews about this in the last couple of weeks. It sort of went viral. I wish I had a better answer because it makes me sound a little creepy that I don't have like some well thought out reason for doing this. But it was another one of these happenstance things where I started noticing how frequently people would use the word creepy or talk about being creeped out or describe somebody as creepy. And so I started asking people, well, what do you mean by that when you feel creeped out? And I just kind of informally was gathering this kind of information, but I was hearing the same thing from people sort of across the board. The only big difference between individuals was women almost always were telling me that there was some kind of weird sexual vibe going on. They felt some sort of sexual threat. Men didn't report that quite so often. But being a good psychologist, I thought, well, let me go look this up and see what people have to say about it. And I was absolutely blown away that there had not been a single study on creepiness ever in the history of humanity. There was not one single study that anybody had looked at this for. So I thought, well, here we go again. Here's a chance to do something new. Again, coming at it from an evolutionary psychology point of view. If it is a human universal response, it's a response to something. And what is it that it's doing for us? And it's not the same as some other emotions, right? It's not like terror or fear. When something really scary is happening and you know that it's scary, you do the right things. You scream, you run away, you deal with it. It's not the same as disgust. When you're disgusted by something, you avoid it. It's clear what's going on. My hypothesis was that creepiness is what you experience when you don't know what's going on, but you really feel the need to find out. And so you're in this state of hypervigilance. I'm talking to a person who's breaking all the little rules, right? They're not letting me out of the conversation. Their eye contact is really bizarre. They're giggling and licking their lips and doing all these weird things. If this is just an awkward person, it's going to be pretty rude and embarrassing for me to start screaming and running away from them, right? But at the same time, if there is a reason to scream and run away from them, I want to do it. So you end up just sort of wallowing in the discomfort. You don't know what to do, and you become hypervigilant. You're like screening out everything else in the world except the cues from this individual because you're trying to figure out if there's something to be afraid of or not. And this would have been adaptive, going back to our prehistoric ancestors again. If one of your ancestors is walking through the forest and all of a sudden the bushes are rustling over there, well, it could just be the wind, right? Or it could be a rabbit, or it could be a predator or an enemy. And those individuals who said, it's probably just the wind and kept walking are no longer with us. The ones who froze in place and said, uh-oh, what's this? And they watched and watched and watched. So we're the descendants of cowards as well as busybodies in that respect.
Man, I'm depressed now.
Hey, it works. Cowardly busybodies. That's the way to go.
So your operational definition then is based on sort of vagueness of threat. It's
Right.
something that we really can't define. And I think that's interesting because if you were to ask me to define, what is it I find that's really difficult to articulate, although I know it when I see it or feel it.
That's
So
like
it is
pornography, right? Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's about ambiguity, and it's adaptive because it's an unpleasant feeling. So you're motivated to do something to resolve that unpleasant feeling. Because if it was a good feeling, you would be drawn to it, and we don't want that. So it's about helping you process ambiguous information. And it's not just about people. Places can be creepy too, right? I've written some articles about haunted houses, for example, and they have all the same things. They look like it's easy to get lost in there. There's lots of places for things to hide. It's dark. It's usually remote where help couldn't get to you very quickly. And you don't know that there's anything dangerous to worry about there, but you are on your guard immediately. You don't perceive these places as safe. In public spaces, people report feeling unsafe in environments where there's a lot of cover for things to hide, but you're also not able to monitor the environment from a long distance. It's called prospect and refuge. Geographers and architects talk about this as something they build into design. Mm-hmm. So I think it's about being on guard. And the paper was really more about bringing out the idea about this. And yes, we did this survey of 1,300 people and gathered all this fun stuff, all of which was consistent with what my hypothesis was all about. But we're a long way from having proved anything. We're just kind of opening the can of worms, and I assume other people are going to sort of pick it up. But I'm not surprised, I guess, the press jumped all over it because we're asking about what hobbies are creepy, what occupations are creepy, and who's not going to have fun with that, right?
Yeah. I did find something interesting in your sample set of 1,300. From what I was reading, like 95% of males and 95% of females both gauged that males would be creepier than females.
Yeah, everybody agreed on that. Males are creepier.
What did they say? Why? Why are we creepier?
We didn't ask them why males are creepier, but I think it makes sense. If being creeped out is all about worrying about some sort of threat, men are just more threatening, whether you are a man or a woman, right? If you're a guy worrying about being physically attacked, you're going to worry about another guy before you worry about a female. And if you're a female worried about being physically attacked or sexually assaulted in some way, you're certainly going to be worried about a male. So males are just more dangerous objects and hence more likely to make us feel creeped out. Some people who've been doing stories on this have asked me, and I hadn't thought about it, what does a woman have to do to be creepy? I think that's a really interesting question. I'd like to pursue that at some point let's face it, the bar isn't set very high for a guy to be creepy, right? A couple of little faux pas and you're there. And right away,
Yeah.
Chris, you know this better than anybody probably, right?
Well, I'm thinking, according to your study, the lip licking, the hand rubbing, if a woman's looking at me and doing all those things, she's not creepy. I'm happy, right? I'm happy. That's great for me. I'm like, yeah, she's checking me out. So
That's an interesting point, though, right? It seems like it would be something that is more subjective. You know, clearly you found some pretty clear trends. I think that's interesting that as a woman, I can say, oh, that's creepy. And I think another woman would understand. But, you know, Chris and I will talk about this sometimes, you know, oh, was that creepy or was that person creepy? And there will be times when he is not and I am creeped out by something. So as much as it sounds like it would be subjective, it sounds like the trends that you found are not.
Yeah, and I think that's probably right. Getting back to the females being creepy, everybody comes up with the same example. Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction, right? The stalking woman who's boiling the family rabbit and doing all of this creepy stuff. But they really have to ratchet it up to make a female character seem that creepy. I mean, whereas for a male character, all you have to do is, you know, let him walk around with a funny expression on his face and people think he's creepy. But yeah, for females, you really have to make him do a lot more.
that is fascinating, actually. I never thought of it in that context. And it puts us at a disadvantage. We talk about this because of our job. You know, our work is involving and finding vulnerabilities in companies through the human network. And we have found that most of the time, females are more successful at that job when it comes to influencing a person to take an action they shouldn't take, like whether it's letting them in through the front door without authority, whether it's on the phone asking questions like for their passwords or other private details that they shouldn't give. Females tend to be more successful, whereas a male, to be having the same success ratio, we really need to work harder at our pretext. Like, I can't play dumb on the phone. That won't work for me. I play dumb and people are like, what are you, a moron? You know, what's wrong with you? But some of our female agents that do this, they'll play dumb on the phone and that works for them. All the guys want to help. I'm the knight in shining armor. Let me give you all my answers because I'm here to help.
Well, I think women, if I'm right about the creepiness thing, their creep detectors are just more sensitive because they are more vulnerable in many ways. They're accustomed from long-standing habit to be more vigilant, to be more careful, to ask more questions. Whereas a guy, it may not come as naturally because he hasn't had to worry about it as much. So I guess I'm not surprised to hear you say that. That's an interesting application.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Okay, then the next part that just totally blew me away, because I would have guessed that clowns would have won. Even though I'm not like Dave, I would have guessed that clowns would have won, but it looks like taxidermists actually were your top creepy.
No, clowns were number one.
Oh, were they? Okay, I thought clowns were at 21.14 and taxidermists were 21.4.
No, I've got the data right here in front of me. Clowns and taxidermists were 1 and 2, and they were very close together.
Okay.
They separated themselves from the pack. Funeral directors and sex shop operators.
Yes.
But yeah, well, taxidermists and funeral directors, think about that one, right?
Yeah.
You've got a person who presumably could do just about anything for a living, but they prefer to spend all of their time with things that are dead.
Yeah.
And right away, that makes them unusual.
Yes.
And if they're unusual in that way, what other ways might they be unusual? And if they like things that are dead, maybe they would like me better if I was dead. Your mind starts going in all these funny directions.
Uh-huh.
At the very least, you're on your guard. This is an unusual person who does things most people wouldn't do, like the hobbies. When somebody collects things that we usually remove ourselves from, spiders and insects and snakes and body parts. I was doing an interview on Irish National Radio just a couple of days ago, and the guy was talking about some woman who had called into his show and claims to have saved every toenail clipping she'd ever had in her life.
Oh.
I'm thinking, what an icebreaker on a first date, right? You know, up to my place. And
would you find that woman creepy, Chris? Because you said you seem to have a pretty high bar.
I find her disgusting, not creepy. Like, that doesn't creep me out. That makes me gag a little. Like, the idea of if you were at her house and you opened up her drawer next to her bed and there was toenail shavings in there for 30 years, I'd have a hard time not puking everywhere.
Just kept it in a refrigerator, you know.
Oh, that's just horrible. Like, I can never eat in that house ever again. Anything. I don't care if it touches. I can never eat in that house ever.
That was just shared with me. I'm not the one that came up with that one. But
oh, man.
Getting back to clowns, you were a little surprised that they weren't as far in front. What's your thinking on that?
Well, it's just, so I've never been a big fan of clowns. Now, I'm not as bad as Dave, but the whole concept, every time I see a clown, there's no joy. Like, I look at the clown and I'm not laughing. I'm looking at an adult person dressed up in makeup, hiding who they really are. Their hair is crazy. Their face is crazy. I don't know how to describe it. They creep me out.
Well, yeah, for all the reasons you just said. They're unusual. They've got physical characteristics that make them different from other people. They got the makeup on, and maybe it looks like they're smiling, but are they really?
Yeah.
And they're mischievous, right? You don't know if you're going to get a pie in the face or what's going to happen. And so, yeah, they're unpredictable. And they're usually men. So, yeah, I think the more of these, creepiness isn't like an either or thing. You accumulate points, for each of the other things that you get. And the clown piles them all. He's got it all going on. And then when you have the John Wayne Gacy's and people like that, it just really drives the message home.
So that's what I wonder, if our era of time, where we are in the span of time, I would love to have you go back 60 years and do this study, because you see pictures like in the 40s and 50s of kids in hospitals, and there's clowns surrounding them while they're getting better, and they don't look freaked out. But in the age of John Wayne Gacy, in the age of like Pennywise, Stephen King's novel, in the age of those things, clowns have become scary now. They've become objects of where people get hurt or killed because of them, not fun-loving circus things.
Oh, I mean, there were killer clowns from outer space. I don't know if you remember the awful movie from 30 years ago. But I think it might be the other way around. I mean, I think it isn't so much that events have made clowns suddenly seem creepy. I think clowns came into existence because they embody things people already find a little bit odd and off-putting and mischievous and the fun about clowns, when you go to a circus and you see them doing the things where they involve the audience members, there's always that little bit of element of danger, right? You don't know if somebody's going to get a bucket of water thrown on them or something's going to happen to someone. And it's about the unpredictability. But of course, that's a safe setting. But, when the clown comes and sits next to you in a booth in a dark restaurant, that's a different story, right?
Man, that's a real different story, dude.
A little jar of toenail clippings.
Oh, really?
Those big shoes, the size of the clippings you would get. Right?
Oh, that's so horrible. Let's say it's halfway through. You had this list of factors that led to a person being considered creepy. Things like pale skin, unkempt hair, long fingers. I had two questions on this. First was a story that this fascinated me, this part of your study. We actually had this happen at a conference we were at with Dave. Somebody had creeped his wife out. And we asked her, everyone was asking, why are you creeped out by this guy? And she goes, I don't know. He just gives me the creeps, creeps me out. So we kind of ignored it because there was nothing. He didn't touch her. He didn't do anything to her. He didn't harass her. So we're like, okay, whatever. Well, looking at the pictures of the party that everyone was at, there was a couple where he was standing behind her, sniffing her hair. And the long story of the short was, break up, girlfriend, she wear the same shampoo or whatever. But she was creeped out by this guy and never saw him actually do it. But obviously there was some kind of nonverbal communication or something that led her to feel this guy is standing too close. That was one of your ones on the top of the list, right? Had very pale skin and was dressed oddly and probably was licking his lips and doing all these other things that you are talking about here. That it just was a weird story to then read this and go, hey, there's scientific proof he actually is creepy.
Yeah. If there was one thing that the press releases on this and the stories that are being passed around got wrong, they looked at that list and thought that we had actually analyzed each one of those things separately. What we had done was to compile a list of physical features and nonverbal behaviors and things, and we found out which things sort of hung together, and we combined them into one variable that we then analyzed. So it's not like we looked at bulging eyes and pale skin and all of that separately. But what we did find is that a person with very unique physical characteristics that set them apart do in fact put us on our guard right away. I don't think the physical traits in and of themselves are enough to make somebody creepy. So, if I've got the pale skin and the bulging eyes or whatever else we want to use as an example, if you interact with me and I act perfectly normal, you can overcome that pretty easily. But I think it's a magnifier for behaviors. So if I look creepy to begin with, And then I'm sniffing hair and collecting toenails and licking lips and constantly steering the conversation toward sex of an unusual variety. Then the physical characteristics make me seem more creepy more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think in and of themselves. I think the creepiest ones, and I didn't check this in the study, but are probably the ones that people are perceived to have control over. So you can't help it if you have bulging eyes or pale skin. But if there are some hygiene issues or the way you dress or something where it appears that you've made a choice here, I think that is the thing that will creep people out more.
So you answered my second question, because I was going to ask that, like, some of these things, like if you have long fingers or you have bulging eyes or you just have a weird smile because of the shape of your face or mouth or whatever, those things don't seem to be things that you can control. So how would a person be less creepy with that? But you answered that, because there are a lot of things on this, like you have dirty clothes and odd dress and greasy hair, how close they stand to people. These things are controllable items. So you're saying if someone were to control those items, even though they had some of these physical attributes, they can conquer creepiness.
Yeah, and I think it's because we have rules about how close you stand to somebody, what's polite to talk about in a conversation, how you should dress in different situations. And if the person has a complete disregard for those rules, what other rules might they have a complete disregard for? And I don't think I really want to find that out. And so that's why they put us on edge.
Well, I think the other interesting segue then is I think your study said that the participants felt like they didn't necessarily know they were creepy. So the creepers don't really know that they're creeping people out.
That's what we believe about creepers anyway. And one of the things I wished I had done was to ask people how creepy they thought they were to see if that predicted anything.
That's self-analysis.
I may do that at some point. But you're right. The consensus was overwhelmingly that creepy people just don't know that they're creepy and they probably can't change. And the implications of that are, if you're talking about your workplace and somebody asks you who the office creep is, if you can't think of anybody, yeah.
Then maybe it's you. That's terrible.
Oh, Michele, it's definitely you. Okay.
Oh.
You're the office creep. Yeah, one of the things that I thought was interesting, too, is that a lot of the factors that were in your report about what people believed were creepy were just that they were beliefs. They were things like, I think that this person's hiding something from me, or I think that their behavior is a little odd, or I'm okay if I think I'll never meet them again. So it seemed like creepiness also was very subjective to what the person's viewpoints, like maybe someone doesn't find weird sexual conversation creepy. So if that was done in front of them, they wouldn't be creeped out. But someone who's more strict about that would find that to be creepy.
Yeah, and I do think creepiness is in the eye of the beholder. But I think what we were discovering was that all of the beholder's eyes seem to be looking for the same things to creep them out. But yeah, you got to feel a little sorry for creeps if they don't really know what's going on, because it might be hard to rehabilitate them. A weird thing has happened actually since I published this. I've gotten a bunch of kind of scary messages from people who think they are creeps and either want to help me. I'm afraid I'm going to get some invitations to people's homes or something.
Yeah.
But other people who are actually kind of looking for help, like they want to be uncreeped in some way or other, and they seem to think I have the answer for that. But I have to say, the messages I get from them right away convince me that they're correct.
Yeah. You can almost hear their mouth breathing through the email.
Yeah. And their long fingers stroking the keys.
Yeah. With their bulging eyes reading the screen.
Yep, that's right.
Standing too close to it. Actually, that may be the subject of a book, how you can help people through creep therapy or something.
Well, I'm actually doing a book on, it's a combination of the science of creepiness and belief in the paranormal, like ghosts and haunted houses and that sort of thing. It's in the very early stages, but yeah, I have an agent and the whole business, so.
It's a fascinating piece of research done. Like you said, nothing done on it ever before, this kind of a topic. So very interesting.
And, that's the thing. The stuff that's right under our noses, gossip, creeps. And meanwhile, there's been hundreds of studies on why the rat turns left,
Right. In your research, was there anything that indicate they feel that the person they're interacting with is creepy? What's the next step? What should they do?
That's an excellent question. Now, one I had not thought of. How to deal with creeps, sort of manual. Step A. Yeah. I think that's why being creeped out is so uncomfortable, because you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
You know what to do when you're afraid. You know what to do when you're disgusted. You know what to do when you're angry. By definition, you don't know what to do when you're creeped out. And all you can do is continue to monitor and process information.
And most of us don't want to be downright rude and just, leave or abruptly, do something that that would seem rude. I think that seems to be sort of the underlying theme, is this idea of social lubrication and how important it is for us as social creatures to be able to get along.
Yeah, we want to be nice. We don't want to hurt people's feelings. And when you do find the predatory creep invite you over to dinner and then cannibalize you, they get what they want. There's something called the foot in the door technique, where you ask for very small favors that everybody is going to do for you. The person who does the favor starts to think of themselves as, oh, I'm a person who does favors for you. And it's very hard to say yes, 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 and then suddenly say no. And so the creep engages with you, and you agree to have the conversation, and you agree to go sit down, and you agree to this and you agree to that. And before you know it, you're being eaten.
Exactly.
But like you said, that's more of a predatory type of person, because they realize they're probably creepy and they realize that their fetishes or whatever are very strange.
Yes.
So this would be not the normal. Michele was saying in your conversation, we travel a lot for work and we're training together. She said this before. Sometimes I'll notice that guys get aggressive with her visually. So they don't actually say anything, but it's the way that the length of the time that they look at her or something. And it creeps me out a little, like, is there going to be a problem? And I'll say, did that guy just creep you out? And sometimes she's like, yeah, like that guy, I don't like him. Or sometimes it's like, no, I didn't even notice it.
Michele.
Or sometimes they're straight, like in the threat category. So as you said, there's no ambiguity. I just know that guy is what he is.
But I'm interested from a woman's point of view. Okay, a guy is giving you the look. He's obviously interested. There are ways in which guys can do that. And even if you're not interested in them, it's flattering and you don't perceive it as threatening. What are some of the rules that the guy breaks where he crosses that line from appearing interested to appearing creepy?
Ooh, that's a really interesting question. I think for me personally, it would feel like whatever contact was an inappropriate level of intimacy. If they're standing too close, or if they try to maintain eye contact for too long, if they're touching too much. And these are things that you don't generally expect with someone that you've just met, particularly with someone of the opposite sex. So I think for me personally, that's when I feel like, as you said, sort of an ambiguous situation. It's my job to make contact with people, to do good business, to be friendly. But at the same time, I feel like there's at least an inappropriate level of something assumed. And that makes me uncomfortable, I think.
And from my angle, it's the length of time. Like, we'll be walking through the hotel lobby, going to training, and you could see guys take a look at her, and then they, go back to their business. And some guys get fixated, and they don't look away. And that, to me, as a person traveling, that's creepy. Because it's like, now you're not just looking. Now, like, what's going on in your head? Like, okay, here it is, right? I'm making up a storyline. Like, what's going on in your head? What are you spending so much time looking for? Like, do I have to go over there and hurt you? Like, hey, how about if I make it so you can't see her? Like, there's all these things that...
Your eyes out.
Yeah, exactly. There's all these things that go through my head. Like, why are you taking so long? Be like any other normal guy. Look and look away. It's done, But it's like, I have the timer out. This is 5 seconds too long. Now you're a creep.
See, this is why it's good having Chris as my boss, because it's kind of like having a pit bull as well. But I remember there was one occasion where I remember telling Chris, I feel like I have hams tied to my body. I mean, it was just, at that point, I felt unsafe as opposed to feeling creeped out.
I also felt unsafe for you then, because we were in a very heavy military town. And it was really strange. She walked in the hotel and it was as if she was in a dog pound with hams tied to her. I was like, what's going on here? Like, are we in a zombie movie? What's happening? This is like ridiculous. Like,
but again, that was not an ambiguous situation at all. It was pretty clear. So the whole creepiness is much more sort of, I don't know if subtle is the right word, but it is very vague.
Yeah, in the description of the situation that you just gave me, you're not really creeped out anymore. You may be afraid. But
sure.
Because there's no ambiguity. You know
right.
what these guys are after, and you know that you don't want to be alone with them. Whereas in the creeped out situation, You don't know. This could just be this innocent, clueless person. And I
And
think
it's sad because we're always saying he looked too long and he's standing too close. And I feel a little bad about that.
It's just the way it is. We live with it.
Yeah, seriously. If I'm walking through a hotel and a girl actually spends 5 seconds looking at me, I'm the man. I'm going to go and do the happy dance in my room. There's no
Unless you got food slobbered on you or something.
Yeah, ask Michele. That's actually a real story right there. There's probably a stain somewhere, or I left my zipper down, or something hanging off my leg or whatever. That's what's happening. It's not anything great. So,
but I do think getting back to the guy feeling threatened, part of it is, okay, we have rules, and okay, the guy is allowed to express interest and let you know that he's interested. But when you have non-verbally or otherwise shown him that you're not interested back, the rules are he's supposed to sort of back off. And the guy who doesn't is the one that becomes more threatening. He becomes more threatening if you think he understood what you just communicated but ignored it. He becomes creepy if you think he just doesn't understand and he's persistent.
Isn't that interesting? So again, that's up to perception. If she perceives he understood, now he's threat.
Right. But if she perceives that he's just not getting the signal here, and any normal person would get the signal here, what am I dealing with?
Right.
That's when you start feeling creeped out.
So that's interesting. Remember, Michele, that guy who was just fascinated with your stockings? And he just wouldn't stop looking at your legs nonstop.
It sounds like traveling with Michele is a real adventure.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's a real adventure. This guy just wouldn't stop staring at her legs, and I was getting angry. I found myself getting angry, like, I'm going to kick this guy out of class. This is bothering me. And for her, she's like, nah, he's not a threat. He just stop. Don't worry about it. And I think it's what you're saying. I was just being the guy, being protective. And she was like, he's not threatening. That's interesting. Yeah, it is an adventure, Michele.
Always.
And we got tons more of those stories. If you ever need another study, we'll just send you Michele for a month.
Just follow her around for a couple of
Yeah, just follow Michele for a month, and you have so much data you won't know what to do with it.
And he will be creeped out by me. So,
yeah,
that's the way
that is true.
Remember, the bar is set pretty high.
Yeah.
It sounds like you can do it.
Yeah.
I'm up there. I aim for my goals.
Yes, very goal-orientated. Where do you go from here? What's next? Where do you take all of this next?
Well, there are little tidbits, and some of which we've already talked about. If we ask people to estimate their own level of creepiness, and we then use that to make some predictions about their behavior or understand creeps in a different way, I would really like to find out how cross-culturally consistent this is. So if we could get a really nice size sample from very different societies and see if everybody's on the same page. And obviously, if it's about violating rules, the rules in one place are not the same as the rules in another place. So what might be perfectly normal here might seem creepy somewhere else. But I'm talking about more than that. Setting aside that issue, I want to know if it's kind of a human universal that we're all creeped out by the very same things or not. So those would be two immediate things I could think of. Pursuing the idea of female creepiness, what kind of woman does it take to be a real creep,
We want to know.
We really do want to know that.
Well, you think you do.
That's true. That if we found out, that may ruin everything, right?
That's true. I may discover that I actually am creepy, so maybe we should approach that question.
Dr. McAndrew releases this study and depression goes up 34% in America. Okay, so listen, there's two things we always do as we're closing up a podcast. First, if people want to know more about you, if they want to follow you, or if they want to read your research, where can they go to learn more about and your work?
Well, I've got lots of online presences, but the most direct place, I have a frankmcandrew.com professional page, and that will give you links to my research, my CV, anything else you may want to find. So that's probably the best place to go.
And then second is, and this doesn't have to be related to this topic, but our listeners are avid readers. A lot of people love to read. Is there any book or books that you have read that you just said, I would love to share this with the world?
Well, wow, where to even start? As a professor, you read a lot of books. I'm going to take a pass on that one right now because I have too many friends who've written books that I've written reviews of. And if I do some and not others, I'm in trouble.
Fair
Pick
enough.
none of them.
Yeah.
Pick one. Have you written a book yourself yet?
I've written a textbook that was a pretty successful textbook about 25 years ago, and I've moved on to other things. So the book I'm working on right now is my first book in quite a while, as well as academic journal articles.
When that book comes out, maybe we'll get a chance to have you back on and talk about that.
Sure. No, I'd be happy to. You were asking other ways to get a hold of me. I also write a blog for Psychology Today magazine. And so there's a place to go there to see where I share my wisdom with the world, so to speak.
Excellent.
Such as it is.
That's actually how I found you.
Okay.
Yeah, there was an article from this study in Psychology Today, and it came across my feed and read the study. So fascinating. I can't thank you enough for responding. And I thought it was funny, your first response to me, your title, Chief Human Hacker. No, not creepy at all. I thought that was...
Well, it's not your everyday byline, you know?
Yes. So I said, okay, we got to get this guy on the podcast. He's got a great sense of humor. We have to have him on.
Well, and hacker immediately conjures up, with a machete,
Okay, I'm not that kind of hacker.
Thank God.
But if you'd like to come over for dinner, I just want... No, I'm not a cannibal, I promise. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, this was the best part of my day. Trust me.
Thank you. He had to be one of my favorites.
He was great, but unfortunately, I now think that I'm probably creepy and I don't know it.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at you a little like you're creepy now, too. Maybe people are staring at you when we travel, not because they find you attractive, but because they think you're creepy.
I'm pretty convinced that that's what it is now.
Yeah, I think so, too.
Thanks, Doctor. Appreciate it.
Man, I tell you, though, if he comes out with that book, that's going to be an epic one to read. I'm really sad Dave wasn't here. That would have been a lot of fun.
I'm sure we'll hear from him.
Yeah. Well, what I'm happy about is that the doc called him out publicly, saying that it wasn't really coffee. It was an excuse to not come and talk about clowns.
Yes, but on the other hand, he also said that clowns were a legitimate concern to society. So,
We're going to cut that part out of the podcast. That's okay. So, and his study. No. Okay, what else? Do we have anything else? I think that's it, right?
I think that's it for now.
So you can check us out on social-engineer.org and social-engineer.com. Twitter is Human Hacker or SOC Engineer Inc. Or if you want Michele, it's Sultry Asian, which everyone's following her now. Well, considering that you didn't start that, I think that makes it less creepy.
Okay, I'll take
Since it wasn't like you calling yourself the Sultry Asian. It actually started because of some dude at Black Hat, and then someone else gave you the account. So, it's not really your fault. So we won't call you creepy for that.
But that in and of itself is kind of creepy.
Yeah, it may be. That's true. Yeah, true. Yeah, you're kind of creepy, Sultry. So if you're still on IRC, you can come to irc.freenode.net on channel social-engineer. Until next time, see ya!
Swan boats and daisy chains. Can't seem to recall any given name. I see the footprints, how they come, how they go. Was that only a moment or many years ago? My heart is gone,